That's perfect.
How do we look?
You guys look great.
Yay.
Okay.
All right.
Action.
Hi. Welcome to the offices of Norfolk Healthy Produce. It's our pleasure today to be joined by our founder, Professor Cathie Martin, who developed the purple tomato. Cathie has a long and extremely distinguished career as a world-leading plant scientist who's made many seminal discoveries both in the molecular biology of plants and the nutritional fortification of foods that we eat, of course including the purple tomato and many, many other breakthroughs. So you don't have to take my word for it. Cathie, thanks for being here today.
Thanks. It's really lovely to come and see the headquarters and to see the fantastic progress that you're making.
Well, we're very glad to have you here. And I want to launch right into our first question, which is, why were you interested in increasing anthocyanins in fruits in the first place?
It was completely serendipitous. A friend of mine in Germany was interested in a project to increase antioxidant levels in tomato, and he was generous enough to include trying to engineer primary metabolism with engineering secondary metabolism. And because my specialty was working on anthocyanins and how they coloured flowers, I thought that it would be quite an easy thing to do to do this in tomato, which doesn't make anthocyanins in the fruit. So.
And for those in our audience who don't have PhDs in plant sciences, could you give us a quick description of what's primary metabolism and secondary metabolism and how that relates?
Primary metabolism is the stuff that keeps us going and allows us to grow. So that's basically the reactions that make energy for us to do stuff and energy for us to build proteins and fats and just generally operate. And then secondary metabolism is the specialized stuff, and plants are very good at that, and they'll make special compounds to color things for insect attraction or for animal dispersers or for humans. And they'll also make special metabolites as defense molecules. So there's a huge range of special metabolism, specialized metabolism, and pigment production is just one of those areas.
And was there something particularly that got you interested in secondary metabolism and pigments?
Yeah. I was hired when I got my PI position. I was hired to work on transposable elements in a garden snapdragon, and the main marker for transposable element activity, and these are pieces of DNA that move around the genome, was color. And so we ended up identifying a lot of genes that were required for making color pigments, and we did that by something that was called transposon tagging. So that's how I got into it.
That's very cool. So I didn't know that. Does that connect to the type of work that Barbara McClintock did?
Absolutely. And one of the reasons I took the job in John Innes was because I heard Barbara McClintock talk, and about. It was very late on in her career. It must have been about 1979. Yeah. And I didn't understand a word that she said, but I got a feeling that it was really, really important, and that I kind of understood what she was saying, but not in I couldn't have listed the points that she was making throughout the talk.
Wow. That's so cool. Yeah. So hopefully most of the people listening have heard of Barbara McClintock, who won a Nobel Prize for her work. And transposable elements are important not just in plants, but of course in humans, animals, all throughout the tree of life.
Yeah.
So a good next step from here is, what's the most exciting part for you of your research?
Seeing something or understanding something that nobody has understood before. There's a sort of glow that comes inside you when you see something for the first time, and you know that you've made a breakthrough. It's not a selfish breakthrough. It's something that it's just going to advance knowledge a little bit.
Can you describe maybe one example of where you were and what you were experiencing when one of the breakthroughs happened?
Okay, so I mean, it's not actually to do with purple tomatoes, but it was. I worked on a gene which we called mixter. It was an unstable gene. It was caused by the mutation was caused by a transposable element, and it did enhance the color of the flowers that we saw. But when we cloned the gene and we had mutants of it, and we analyzed the anthocyanin between the mutant flowers and the wild type flowers, there was no difference in the levels of anthocyanins. And a student of mine, David Jackson, who's now at Cold Spring Harbor, had told me when he was working with me on color that cells could control, well, you could control the color that people perceived by the shape of the cells. Now, this is kind of weird. You don't think about it, but it's the way that light is reflected off. It looks darker if it's a cone rather than flat. And so we got this gene out. We were able to tag it. We had a phenotype, which was little sectors of color from the unstable mutation, but we couldn't see any difference in the anthocyanin in the cells. So I asked the guy who runs the SEM if he would take a look at the shape of the cells under the scanning electron microscope. And I gave him some material. I didn't hear anything, and I passed him on the corridor at lunchtime. And I said, "Oh, did you see anything?" And he said, "Yeah, there were differences." And there were these sectors of conical cells which were revertant in the flat mutant thing, and we cloned the first gene controlling cell shape.
Wow, that's really, really cool.
Yeah, I thought it was cool. Yeah. And it was a special kind of thing that, thanks to David, thanks to me remembering it, he'd left the lab by then, so it was just really nice.
Is that similar to how I remember learning about butterfly wings and how colors in insects, for instance, have to do with iridescence? Is that
yes, it's similar. It's the way that light plays on a surface. But if you look at a red rose, if you look at the front of it, it's a dark red and it's kind of velvety in its color. That's because the conical cells are on that side. If you look on the back surface, it's much paler and it's more like a silk sheen, and there's no conical cells on the back surface.
Yeah. So I can relate to the experience of that sort of eureka moment where you're asking a question with science and you have these hypotheses and sort of usually you're wrong. You say, "Oh, I think it works like this. I'll do this experiment." And, "Oh, no, I'm wrong, back to the drawing board." And you do that a few dozen times. And then at some point it's, "Wait, oh my gosh, I'm surprised by this." Now sort of everything clicks into place.
And it's always worth making that, casual request to someone, "Could you just take a look at this?" Yeah. And then in this case it paid off. It doesn't always, usually it's no, but
well, that's the fun thing. I remember saying, if you're looking for a needle in a haystack, you can't be disappointed when you find a piece of hay. You just keep looking for those needles. And that's a great segue to go to the next question, which is, we're talking about discoveries in basic research. And of course, what's special about the purple tomato and Norfolk Healthy Produce is we have this basic research discovery that's now come out into the world and people are able to eat it and grow it and experiencing it. So what inspired you to take that piece of research out of the lab and into the world?
Firstly, it was the rather unhappy history we had in getting the work published in the first place. So we got this purple tomato, and there was a slight moment when we first saw that the tomatoes were purple as a result of the engineering we'd done, where there was jubilation. And then as the tomatoes developed, and it was only in a little tiny dwarf variety, so we got more and more excited about it. And so after a year or so, we wrote it up as a publication for Nature Biotechnology, and they were extremely critical of it. They didn't want to know, really. And it was really hard. And I think Eugenio, who was the guy who made the purple tomatoes, was very, very upset about this. It was going to be his first publication, and we thought it was a big deal, and everyone who saw them thought they were fantastic and that. But I was lucky enough to be part of a consortium of people who were looking at the health benefits of anthocyanins. And although we tried to do some work on the original project to see whether they were healthy, they were working with nematodes, and it didn't really give us anything tangible that we could publish. But we got the guys on the project, the Italian guys, to do some mouse experiments and to look at cancer-prone mice. And we showed that the consumption of the tomatoes at 10% weight for weight of the diet could extend the lifespan of mice that were inevitably going to die, but about 30% longer. They lived 30% longer, and that was just the nutritional intervention. And we knew it didn't work with the red tomatoes, so it was the anthocyanins that were doing the job. And at that point, I thought, now I can send it back to get published. That was my first. Yep. And honestly, the reaction from Nature Biotechnology was, from this prevaricated arguments we'd had about the previous one, it was, we were waiting for this, you know, and it got published, accepted, reviewed, accepted, published within a month. Yeah. And the reaction in the press was absolutely fantastic. So even though it was a GMO, there were people writing to me saying, oh, please, can I have some? And I had to say, no, it's a GMO. Yeah. But if you consume anthocyanin-rich fruit, then you may get some similar benefits from it. And I think it was that reaction that inspired me and Jonathan it was fantastic to try and take it forward as a product, because we knew that people were interested.
Yeah. So I wanna make a mention on the science, and then we'll move on from there. I used to teach a class with undergraduate students in Switzerland, and we would use the purple tomato paper as one of the examples. And it's really funny, these projects, when you're in the middle of them, where it seems so difficult to publish, looking back, it's a phenomenal example of a piece of plant science research, because Eugenio and you take it really from discovering the gene, putting it from a snapdragon into a tomato, showing what the effects are very clearly in the tomato for production of anthocyanins, and then taking it the next step further and saying, what happens if mice eat it? And it's such a nice, clear example, and so crisp. And it's just funny that sometimes these things in hindsight, we say, oh, it's so obvious, it's really difficult to get to that point. And so kudos to you and Eugenio for sticking with it and getting it to that point. And so now take us into the moment where you and Jonathan Jones, the other founder of Norfolk Plant Sciences, said, okay, we see the opportunity, even though it's a GMO, even though back in 2007, 2008, this is, food non grata, we see the opportunity for this to get out. Take me into that moment.
Okay, so it actually started a little bit before that moment. So Jonathan was very keen to develop a blight-resistant potato, which would inevitably be a GMO. And he'd been advised by the potato growers in the UK that the public would only accept something that had a health benefit from it. So I used to share a house as a PhD student with Jonathan, and we work in the same overall institute, although he's in a much better endowed part of the institute than I am. But he generously invited me to form a company with him, and we were going to make, it wasn't coloured flesh because they already exist, but it was high flavanol potatoes with blight resistance in. Well, that idea died pretty much after a year, I think, for various reasons. And the market for potatoes was not such a big market. But I think it was Eric that said, Eric Ward, who said, why don't you just go with what you've got, which was the purple tomato. And I was really pleased at that point, because it was, I think I've never been someone that really wanted to make money out of discoveries, but I do want them to be relevant to society. And as I get older, that becomes more important. So that was great. And we really set about trying to sell the purple tomatoes then.
Yeah. Well, I want to go back to some of the intervening pieces, but it's important to note now, at the start of 2025, that assumption that people would have a different opinion about a GMO, a bioengineered food that had direct benefits to them, that turned out to be entirely true.
Yeah.
And as you know, we've talked about basic research, marketing is no different. You have an idea, it's not worth, you don't know until you test it. and a lot of the best ideas just don't hold up when you do test them. And what we've seen both in marketing the purple tomato, when we do consumer research, when we talk to people, is that is 100% true. And there's a lot of benefits that biotechnology can bring to the foods that we produce that are hidden, that take a lot of scientific understanding, they take a lot of imagination, they take a lot of science to see how they're better. And what's so beautiful about the purple tomato is people can intuitively see it, right? They see it and you say, oh my gosh, wow.
They say, wow.
This is different.
They say, wow.
Yeah. I had this experience last week at a trade show in Baltimore. I'm sitting there at a booth with the purple tomatoes and people are walking by and they stop and they look back and they walk back and they say, they give some version of that look like, I can't quite place this item. Like everything around me makes sense, but this kind of stands out. I haven't seen this before. And they're immediately very curious. What is that? Where did it come from? How did you make it? Why did you make it? And so if you would take us through a little bit of the steps of, okay, it would be a great product and a great story to get the purple tomato out into the world. And now there's about 15 years between then and now. So if you would give us some highlights.
Okay, well, so it became very clear. I mean, even right from the get-go, we got a little bit of funding to start off with a potato project, because that was a commodity crop but we never got any funding for the purple tomatoes. But then it became clear that we were not going to get finance. We were not going to get venture capital. We wrote business plans. We had CEOs that used up all of the funds we had, and didn't get we were going to get millions of dollars, but it was all a long time down the line. And we had a crash meeting, I think it was 2012 or something like that, 2011, 2012. We were down in London. There were a group of people who were quite enthusiastic about getting a consumer benefit trait out there. And I thought we were going down to fold the business, actually, but it was David Lawrence, who suggested that if we made a product that was not living, if you like, then we could put it through FDA, get approval that it was safe, and we could sell that product, growing it as a field trial under license from USDA. Because the problem was that USDA deregulation was so expensive, and if you listen to the big companies, they would say at least $100 million, and we didn't have any employees, so we didn't have that kind of money. So that's basically what we set out to do, and it took quite a lot of time, and Eric was fantastic in terms of supporting that. But I had to then, we started negotiations with FDA for the product in 2017. In 2020, after 3 years of discussion with them, they thought that we had enough information to submit a BNF. Even that is a challenge, because although it's a BNF, it's called a Biotechnology Notification Form. There is no form. So you have to do a Freedom of Information Act request to see what somebody else has done, so that you can construct an application similar to that. And I was able to submit an application for notification to FDA it was just before the pandemic, so it was March 2020. And I got an acknowledgement of receipt and then didn't hear anything more. But, and again, I have to thank Eric for his fantastic insight. At that point, things were changing in the US in terms of the regulatory structure. So there was some rules that were, or some law that was being brought in to just streamline the deregulation process by USDA. At the same time, a wonderful journalist called Jennifer Kahn, who's writing for the New York Times magazine, decided to look back at some old interviews she'd done with us. And she was going to write it about gene editing only, but she decided to write something about looking again at GMOs, because there were some important examples of GMOs that did really do things for society, like the virus-resistant papaya. And she put our purple tomatoes, tomatoes on the cover, which was great. Then in 2021, the law for the revision to the Secure Rule came in, and Eric and I and our lawyer drafted an RSR submission, and it was a little bit more than the 180 days that they promised, but we got USDA deregulation, and that was just fantastic because it allowed us to do not just a juice, which is what we had been proposing with FDA, but we could sell the seeds. And for me, that was the big thing, that we could get them out to people.
Yeah, well, and that's the point where I started to get involved too, was, hey, there's about to be an opportunity to grow these in the US just like any other tomato. And maybe for those who don't know, the whole USDA process, Cathie uses the term deregulated. And what that means is when you make a new GMO, a new bioengineered plant product, that needs to be kept all the time in containment. That means it's grown in a controlled facility where it can't get out into the environment until there's enough studies and enough evidence that says this is not a threat to the environment, and then it can be treated the same as any other plant. And there's often a lot of confusion because the word deregulated sounds like other things, and
it
people
sounds
sometimes
like there's no regulation. There has been plenty of regulation.
And there's lots of, in fact, there's a lot more regulations on something that's bioengineered than something that's created through conventional breeding or chemical mutagenesis or treating with, X-rays and other things that induce mutations. And so that was really a big development, that there was an opportunity for the purple tomato to be treated the same as any other tomato. And what's also very interesting to insert here, we're here in Davis, California. Davis, California is the home of many developments in agriculture, including the first ever GMO or bioengineered food that was brought to market, which is the infamous Flavor Saver tomato. This is something that did get out on the market. By some accounts, it was very successful as far as being a product that tasted good, that people wanted to buy, that people were excited about. It was not a commercial success. It was not on the market very long. And it also led to the creation of a lot of the regulations that now govern biotechnology. And at that time, we didn't know a lot about biotechnology. Now we have decades of data and information that says any type of food that's made with biotechnology is not fundamentally different from one not made with biotechnology. And we do have a case-by-case review process now to ask, okay, what were the changes? What could the impacts be? And hopefully we're entering into a time, this is now just my opinion, where we can use the facts, we can use the science that's been established to look at the new products, whether that be gene editing, whether that be bioengineering, look at them on their own merits and look at the safety considerations compared to the status quo, compared to other products that are out there. And this is very encouraging, and so it's kind of fun to be here in Davis where a lot of this started, and bring this arc full circle now that we are, of course, marketing this bioengineered, this GMO tomato, and arguably I'll claim much more successfully than the Flavor Saver tomato was. So that leads us into, Cathie, what are your hopes for the future of the purple tomato?
So my hopes, I love the side of it where we're selling seeds to home growers, because I think that addresses the argument that people don't want GMOs. Mm-hmm. And if it can be used seen as a vanguard product that can pave the way for other beneficial traits that are good for consumers. I'm all for that. I really want that. It doesn't have to just be tomatoes. And I know that there are a lot of people who've been frustrated by the fact that some traits like high polyunsaturated fatty acids, fish oils as they're called, which can be made in plants, have to be made by genetic modification. They can't be done by gene editing. So there are a lot of traits that really do need GMO, and I'd like to see those as facilitated as the gene editing, which seems to be going forward fast. So that would give us the whole range of biotechnology, and I think we can do better. We can, and part of the need is to actually try and reverse some of the problems that have come with a decline in nutritional value of the foods that we do eat through breeding for yield alone. So it's a little bit of saying, hey, there were some mistakes in the past, let's try and correct these, because I love food and I want it to be good and available to everyone, good nutritious food for everyone.
Yeah. Well, I think, Cathie, you've clearly been very successful on this mission, and it's obviously, hopefully you're hearing in this conversation how much work it took, how many years it took, how much dedication it took just to get it to this point. And it's far from over. You know, we're just embarking on the beginning of the next chapter, and yet what we're seeing and hearing is the fears around GMOs are actually, with the average consumer, almost non-existent. And this is lodged deeply in the imagination of scientists, of people who use biotechnology, of plant breeders, because the pushback around the first generation of GMOs was so strong. You know, there were protests, there were threats, there were all sorts of very strong reactions, and that, of course, sinks very deeply.
I think a lot of the the arguments are anti-globalization arguments, and I think if you can say a lot of things about Norfolk Plant Sciences and Norfolk Healthy Produce, but it's not globalization.
Completely correct, and that's one of the reasons this has been the greatest honor of my career so far, is working with this company, because we have shown that you don't need $100 million to bring a product like this to market. You don't need a multinational company with thousands of employees. You don't need all of these things that it was always believed. What you need is scientists who are experts. You need a team of dedicated people. And so I want to mention, we're here in Davis. We have a very small team of about 6 people who work in this company bringing the product out to market. And everyone here wears many hats. We're breeders, we work in the greenhouse, we care for the plants, we produce the seeds, we produce videos like this. It's really an all hands on deck activity with a lot of team spirit, and this is the kind of thing, never doubt the power of a single person to change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. And I think, Cathie, you can feel very proud at the impact that your work has had and your stick-to-itiveness has had.
Well, I'm really proud of you guys, and I'm proud of all of the tremendous support we've had from everyone in the US. It's been great. It's my mission now to try and get us to be able to buy them in the UK, which is a kind of irony that they came out of the UK and I can't buy them there.
Well, that leads to an interesting question. Let me give a highlight and then I'll ask the question. So in 2024, we started selling out to the public. We sold 13,000 packets of home garden seeds, which is much, much more than we ever expected. And of course, we had no marketing and sales budget. We were just here doing our humble and generous activities, and we found that there was a tremendous response. We also had a phenomenal partner that sold purple tomatoes at several grocery stores in the mid-Atlantic, east coast of the US, and we sold over 100,000 clamshells of tomatoes. Again, much more than we would have expected in our first season on the market. And we're building on that now in 2025. We're finding an extremely positive reaction. We also did consumer research that showed 80% of people in the US want our product, and there's only a small fraction, about 5%, who say they don't want our tomato. And that's fine. They have many other options out on the market. So it's really a question of choice. And so given that there's so much momentum and so much wind in our sails, this is only in the US. And we are working on several other countries where there is a path to get approval and the ability to sell. In the UK, how does this look, Cathie?
I think it's positive. I mean, I think that we have the precision breeding bill, which is for gene editing, and that seems to be going forward. And I think they were a little bit concerned that a GMO product might detract from that or might be seen to be negative. But I think the success in the US has made them realize that actually the purple tomatoes could support the precision breeding bill and support biotechnology in general. And we have massive investment for research at the moment on engineering biology. So surely we should get over this and think that biotechnology can be a force for good, and as well as for making money. So I'm really hopeful that we will make some forward progress in the UK. I know that in the UK we have to sell to home growers. I know I know the British public. So it's not going to be a big multinational thing. That's really going to focus on home sales.
Yeah, and again, one of the reasons I love this project is it's not about maximizing profits. It's not about how can we get the most revenue. And a purple tomato is never going to be a $1 billion product. It's not the area to play if you want to make a lot of money. If you want to have a very interesting
crop.
it's not a row crop, and that's not what any of us are in it for. We know that that's the world, and yet it's a fantastic opportunity to have a new conversation with the broader public, to have an open, honest, curious, generous conversation, and that's what we've been able to have.
And I must say that the general public, even though I'm a scientist, they always love to talk about food. Everyone's interested in food, the quality, what it tastes like, what they like, what they don't like. And it actually, I must just add that this part of my scientific career has been a lot of fun, and that's what I want it to be. I hope Nate has fun too.
Well, I have a heck of a lot of fun, and it's exactly because of that. I've been in scientific R&D and commercialization for 20 years, and usually you're trying to talk about something very abstract. You know, here's an alternative fertilizer, or here's a plant that's more resistant to a disease, so we don't need to spray so many pesticides. And for most people, they say, well, okay, that sounds great, but it's very abstract, and it's hard to sink your teeth into it figuratively. And when you have the purple tomato, you know, people can eat it, they can talk about it, they say, oh, you know, I thought GMOs were sort of this boogeyman and I would grow a third arm if I even looked at it, let alone taste it. Oh, this is just a tomato. It's no big deal. It's just a tomato, but it tastes great. It has extra nutrients. It's beautiful. This is really fun. And I need to, for this record, share what's very clear when we talk about gene editing versus bioengineering. And there's a belief among scientists and companies that work in this area where we work that the public hates GMOs and that battle is lost. And, you know, the casket's already been buried 6 feet in the ground and forget about it. We have CRISPR, we have gene editing, and that's not yet lost. So let's try to explain to the public the benefits of this, and at least we can salvage this technology. That is completely wrong. So what's very clear with the public is the public doesn't get the difference between gene editing and engineering or GMO. If something goes through the lab and you use some technology to improve it, that's what they understand. And what's funny is many scientists, people with PhDs who do this, they also confuse the difference between gene editing and engineering. It is such a tiny, nuanced, wonky detail. It doesn't matter. What people care about is, how does this impact me? How is the food different that I will eat thanks to these technologies? And what we find is it is GMOs, it's bioengineering that actually gets you the purple tomato, that gets you the pink pineapple, that gets you golden rice, that gets products that are really different, that people can say, oh, I see how this is different. There hasn't yet been any breakthrough gene-edited products that people say, oh, this is something that is really different that I'm going to choose because it's gene-edited. I'm a big believer that we will have those products coming out onto the market. it's still a very theoretical, hypothetical discussion, and I find that frustrating. And here we are, we're not talking in theoretical terms. We have a product that's out on the market. We're at the farmers market booth here in Davis, talking to average people every week, and this is a heck of a lot of fun.
I would even add to that and say that I can see in the future that we might be marking at least the tomato products with the purple trait so that are edited so that you can distinguish them, because the beauty of this trait is you can see it, and so there's no question of people making the wrong choice. If they don't want it, they don't touch it because they can see that it's different.
Completely right. And what your co-founder Jonathan Jones always says is, people see the purple tomato, they can say thanks but no thanks. I don't want to eat GMOs. And that's completely correct. And what we're finding is most people are saying, yes, please, may I have some more? Well, Cathie, this has been phenomenal to sit down with you and get to dive into your perspective, your personal experience developing and launching the purple tomato. Any other thoughts to share with people who are going to get to hear your perspective?
If you can try a purple tomato, do, and let us know. I mean, there's plenty of opportunity for feedback, and we welcome feedback. We realize that our product is not perfect at the moment. We need to make bigger tomatoes for the home growers. We need to make different ones, and we've got some other stuff in the line as well.
Absolutely, and Cathie and the team were walking through the greenhouse looking at our breeding pipeline of the bigger tomatoes, the sauce tomatoes, the flavorful tomatoes, everything that's coming out in the future. And I'll remind everyone too, we need everyone's support. Please, share with us your feedback of what you'd like to see in the future. Of course, right now we're in the seed selling season for the 2025 gardening season. You can buy seeds on our website. There are more and more garden centers that will be stocking seedlings. So for those of you who want to buy plants to transplant in the garden, look out for those. And we will be selling in grocery stores, in farm stands, in select locations throughout the U.S. in 2025. Check out our website and our social media for more information on that.
Yeah.
Cathie, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.